Thank you all so much for joining us today and coming to visit us at our beautiful campus. If this is your first visit to UNT Dallas, I personally invite you to come back and take a tour whenever you may have time. I'd love to show you some of the exciting things that are taking place here at our university, including the opening of our new STEM building just a few feet away from you. So we are also developing our community. Today, however, we are here to support the Dallas Housing Summit. And we, UNT Dallas, are so proud and excited to host today's event. So I want to thank you all for coming out and supporting such a worthwhile cause. We are proud and excited to support this crucial event and to collaborate with so many of you, the dedicated partners focused on addressing the housing challenges in our Dallas communities, the same challenges that affect so many of the students that we serve here at UNT Dallas. I hope you found the morning breakout sessions motivational. I'm sure they were insightful, sparking a renewed sense of hope and collaboration. Let's keep working together to ensure everyone in our community has access to affordable housing and a place of their own to call home. Thank you for participating in today's event, and for your partnership, dedication, and commitment to tackling the challenges that face our communities. It is now my pleasure to turn things over to Larshay Thomas, Vice President and Senior Community Development Officer at South State. She will introduce today's keynote speaker. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm actually going to have to stand on my tiptoes here. Well, thank you all again for being with us today. It's really a privilege to be in a room full of leaders, partners, and advocates who care deeply about the future of housing in our communities. As I was thinking about the incredible work that Brian, Tony, give it up for Brian, you guys, he's doing amazing things, that Brian and the Dallas Housing Coalition is doing, my mind actually kept going back to one of my favorite pastimes. Some of you guys may know this, but I love to create puzzles. I do a lot of puzzles. Specifically, one that I have been working on for literally quite the past year almost. But it is a 1,000-piece black and white watercolor James Baldwin puzzle. That's a mouthful, right? And it's also a handful. This has been really a challenge since there are no really, distinct colors to help guide me, and every piece looks the same until I study it clearly. There are days when I want to give up and start a whole new puzzle, especially when I think I'm making progress and I realize I've been working for hours and have barely even moved the needle. So I step away, I have to take a break, sometimes a long break, and when I return, I notice some things that I didn't see before. The picture is still far from complete, but it is further along than when I laid the first piece. Housing can feel the same way. The landscape is complex and it's layered. The solutions often feel like they don't come together quickly. But it takes patience, collaboration, and willingness to step back and return with fresh new eyes, and that is the importance of a coalition. South State is committed to being one of those pieces in this larger picture. We've recently committed $1.5 billion in mortgage lending to underserved households through our 5-year community benefits plan, which includes innovative solutions to meet the community needs, such as financing for community land trust homes, investing in affordable housing projects, and offering down payment assistance program for those first-time home buyers. We show up because we believe our piece has value when it comes and connects to those in the community, and those such as yourselves who are doing the important work. We know that we cannot solve all these challenges alone, but we can partner with intention to strengthen access, opportunity, and long-term stability. We may not see the full picture yet, but every conversation, every partnership, and every project moves us closer than we were when we began and when we laid that first piece. That is the power of coalition. Piece by piece, we're building something stronger for the communities that we serve. And with that, I would be honored to introduce another piece of the puzzle, our keynote speaker. Alex Horowitz has flown all the way from Washington, D.C. He is the project director of housing policy at the Pew Charitable Trust. Alex guides research for Pew's housing policy initiative, focusing on how home financing, the housing shortages, and land use regulations affect households' well-being. He also conducted extensive research on consumer finance issues, including how small dollar loans in consumer banking can be made safer and more transparent. Horowitz manages research and policy analysis covering all these issues. He studies how to improve access to small mortgages and how to effectively and alternatively have financial arrangement used in purchasing housing and making it safer. Horowitz also researches the way in which restrictive zoning drives up rents and homelessness. So following Alex's presentation, we also have Froswa Booker-Drew, which many of you guys may know, who will come up and introduce the rest of our keynote panelists and moderate the discussion so that we can get to know her a little bit better as well. I will also add in her bio. She is the president and CEO of Soulstice Consultancy, founder of the Reconciliation and Restorative Foundation, author of 5 books, including the award-winning Empowering Charity, A New Narrative of Philanthropy, and her newly released book, Front Porch Wisdom, Navigating Leadership Pressures and Barriers as a Woman of Color by InterVarsity Press, which was a top 10 new release for authors on Amazon. Give it up for her. Yes. She is also an adjunct professor at Tulane University and Point Loma University in the Masters of Public Administration program. She is also founder of Her Heritage Giving Circle, one of the first Black women giving circles in the state of Texas, and co-founder of both Power in Action Dallas and the South Dallas Employment Project. Alex, we're excited to have you, and welcome to Texas.
All right, thank you for having me out. Thanks to Dallas Housing Coalition for hosting today's event. My name is Alex Horowitz. I work at the Pew Charitable Trusts. We're a nonprofit organization, and we do research and policy work in the public interest. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the housing shortage and steps that we see states and localities, policymakers and stakeholders taking to deal with the fact that we don't have enough homes in this country and the effects that that is having. So, rents haven't always been this high, but half of renters are spending more than 30% of income on rent, a quarter are spending more than 50% of income on rent. This is not historically normal. In the past, rents consumed a much smaller share of income. Prices to buy have also approached record highs, and historically, homes took about 3 years of income. Now in the US, they're closer to 5, and in Texas, we see that they're around 4, so much higher than the historical norm. Some of what's going on here is that our housing stock is a mismatch for our population. In the US, 63% of households have 1 or 2 people. In Dallas, that number is 67%. But our housing stock doesn't look like it. Our housing stock is mostly single-family detached homes on large lots, even though that's not how people are living. When a lot of our zoning codes were written in the 1920s, the average household size was over 4, and now it's 2.5. So, anyone who's bought or sold a home knows if there are a lot of homes out there, that is good for buyers because sellers are eager to sell, but they're competing against lots of other sellers. When there are not many homes out there to buy, then prices go up because there are too many people bidding on each home. Rents work exactly the same way. When rental availability rates get low, rents go up. When rental availability rates get high, rents go down. Rents work just the same way as prices. I think it's widely known and sort of intuitive about how buyers and sellers markets work. Rents, not quite so much. They work exactly the same way. And also people taking pictures of slides, by all means, but you also can have the deck, so welcome to email me or Dallas Housing Coalition can share it. So rents have been going up everywhere. I think that's pretty widely known, but that hasn't had the same impact on everybody. The housing shortage has been regressive. What does it mean to be regressive? Well, housing works like an escalator. And when that escalator is moving up, people trade up into better options. When the escalator is moving down, everybody bunches up at the bottom. So, from 2017 to 2024, we saw that rents rose 18 points faster in the lowest income quarter of neighborhoods than in the highest income quarter of neighborhoods during that time. That's a big gap between high income and low income areas. So what's going on? When high income renters are looking for a place and they can't find one in a high income neighborhood, they're going to move somewhere. They tend to move into middle income neighborhoods. Where do middle income households go? They need somewhere too. Who can they outcompete for a home? They trade down, move into lower income neighborhoods. Where do low income renters go? Nowhere to go. We see displacement go up. We see homelessness go up. But most commonly, we see people absorbing steep rent increases that they really can't afford. Not building hasn't worked, but it has been worst. It's done the most damage to low-income renter households. But there's also damage being done to society as a whole. The economy is being hurt by the housing shortage. Inflation, well, the biggest component of the consumer price index is housing costs. And shelter inflation has been rising higher than non-shelter inflation. GDP, the size of the economy. When people can't move to the places where they can earn the most and be most productive, that slows down the whole economy in a region, in a state, and in the country. Labor markets. Go back to the 1900s, and we see that people tended to move from low-income areas to high-income areas where they could earn more. And now that pattern has really stopped. And we even see people moving away from better-paying jobs because they can't afford the housing in markets that have good-paying jobs. The cities with the highest incomes have been displacing residents. And lastly, workforce. This creates a mismatch where employers can't hire the workers they need for their businesses because the people that they need can't find housing nearby. And so when companies are choosing where to locate and to move from one state to another, housing costs are often a major driver, which is why we see companies relocating out of California, because the people who'd work at their companies have been priced out by the state's failure to build homes. But there's other damage too. So when housing isn't allowed in cities and towns, people push further out where builders can build and where people can find some housing. But that leads to higher infrastructure costs. A mile of sewer is kind of a mile of sewer. The question is how many people are allowed to live along that mile. When it's not many, the cost per household goes up. More housing can either mean more traffic or it can mean less traffic. It depends where it's built. When housing is built in downtowns, when it's built near transit stops, when it's built near commerce, we actually see vehicle miles traveled as a proxy for traffic go down. When it's built further out and people are driving more and they have to drive longer distances and they only have one way to get around by driving, we see traffic go up. And commute times go up, and wear and tear on roads and infrastructure spending go up too. Multifamily housing and homes on smaller lots use less energy and use less water at a time when energy and water usage are strained in a lot of places. But sometimes communities ask, well, can we really have more housing when we've strained our electric grid or we're straining our water capacity? Multifamily housing just simply uses less than single-family detached, and homes on small lots use less energy than homes on large lots, because we see bigger homes as lot sizes get larger. So, if we were having this conversation a decade ago, I would have said to you, look, every analyst out there is going to tell you it's supply and demand, and if you have more houses, more homes, then we're going to see lower costs, and if you have fewer, then costs are going to go up because people are going to be bidding for the homes, but we don't have enough data to say because not enough places have done it. Well, now we do, and the jury's back. And there are places that have tried, and places that have made some serious policy changes to allow a lot more homes. Here are 4 of them: Minneapolis, New Rochelle, New York, Portland, Oregon, Tysons, Virginia. All of them made it easy to build apartments, usually on commercial corridors or near transit stops. And once they did, and they created simple processes for building apartments with by right permitting and cutting parking minimums, then we saw housing production shoot up in all of those jurisdictions. They were all producing housing during these years we studied at more than double the rate of the US. And the same time that rents went up 30% in the US total over the 6-year period, rents went up hardly at all in all of these jurisdictions, less than 1% a year. So in real terms, inflation adjusted for incomes, that means affordability is improving in these places. I was in New Mexico recently. They are struggling. They have seen rents shoot up 60% in that state. And that is a state that cannot afford 60% rent increases. Well, they rank last for permitting new homes in the Western US. They're also the only state in the Southwest that hasn't passed any state laws to allow more homes. That's not a coincidence. We look at Houston, which has been building a lot of housing for a while. And we see that as they've added housing, they've been able to keep rent growth lower. Minneapolis is another example of a city that has made it a lot easier to build, especially apartments on commercial corridors. And as they have, rents have stopped going up there. When there are enough homes for everybody, that's how we see affordability improve. It is the shortage driving our affordability woes and creating this dynamic, this scarcity, where too many people are bidding for each available home because there simply aren't enough of them. Remember, rents work just the same way as prices. When there's not enough, costs go up. When there's enough for everybody, we see affordability improve. So, got some good news. We've got Dallas on this chart. These are 6 metro areas that added enough housing in recent years that they actually saw rents go down in 2023 in all of these metros. But that's not what I'm most interested in this chart. Look at the Class C rents. Class C are older, naturally affordable apartments, usually that were built a while ago and that don't have amenities. Now, the new housing coming online in these areas was mostly higher end, because that's what new construction is. But rents went down the most for Class C, for the older, naturally affordable homes. Why is that, if the new housing stock was at the top of the market? Well, housing works like an escalator. It doesn't have to go down. We don't have to have everyone bunching up at the bottom. It can move up, where people are trading up into better housing options. When more housing comes online, those higher income residents can move out of middle income neighborhoods back into higher income neighborhoods. Those middle income residents can move out of low income neighborhoods back into middle income neighborhoods. And all of a sudden, low income renters who were being displaced, who were being pushed into homelessness, no longer have to compete for their own homes. And so we see rents go down in lower income neighborhoods for older, naturally affordable housing when enough is coming online for everybody. There's an economist now at Notre Dame, Evan Mast, who has looked at this phenomenon that he calls moving chains. He looked at apartments built in high-income neighborhoods and saw that the people who moved into those apartments were who you'd expect. They were higher-income residents. But they moved out of other homes. And the people who moved into the homes that they freed up had incomes a little lower. Were moving in from neighborhoods that had incomes a little lower. And he looked at 6 steps. And by the 6th step, it was mostly people moving out of low-income neighborhoods. And each 100 apartments built in a high-income neighborhood ended up freeing up about 40 to 70 in areas with below average incomes. So what does this look like in practice? Doing a lot of numbers so far, so do a quick story. My wife and I we were foster parents for 7 years and change. We had 9 kids with us during that time, never more than 3 at a time. Was, chaotic enough, but so never more than 3 at a time. There was a boy who was with us for 14 months and then got to go home after 14 months. If kids spend 14 months in foster care, they don't usually go home at the end. That's a long time to spend. What happened? Because that's the only time that we saw that someone spent that long in care among our friends who were foster parents and got to go home. Well, he and his mom had been living at a homeless shelter before he came into care. And she continued living there for the first year that he was with us. But then working with a social worker, she got into housing. It was subsidized housing. And when she did, that helped her solve some problems that had led her to lose her son, to come into the foster care system. And she was able to resolve those, and he got to go home to her after 14 months. Success story. How'd that happen? How did that apartment free up in subsidized housing? Well, we were able to use public records and check back how that happened. Someone had moved out of her building a little bit before she moved into unsubsidized housing, into kind of lower-end market rate housing in a lower-income neighborhood. How'd that home free up? Somebody moved out into a middle-income neighborhood. How'd that home free up? A new fancy apartment building was built in the city, market rate, higher end. Moving chains work. People move between homes. When there aren't enough for everybody, it hurts the people at the bottom the most. That's how she ended up in a homeless shelter in the first place. And then as more housing came online, it's how she got out of it and got her son back after 14 months in foster care. Doesn't happen every day, and it wouldn't have happened if more housing hadn't been built, and the market ended up still having the shortage in it. So I showed you the 6 cities, but these are the 150 largest metros. And what we're seeing as that line goes down is that the amount of housing getting built in a market is a strong predictor of what happens to Class C rents, rents for older, naturally affordable homes. In markets that don't have enough housing getting built, Class C rents get bid up. Look, the problem isn't the 1.5% of housing that's been built recently that's fancy. What about the other 98.5%? What happens with that? It keeps getting more and more expensive when there aren't new homes coming online because people don't have options to trade into. This happens across markets. What about displacement? Theme of this conference, growth without displacement. These are the largest 4 cities in the US: New York, LA, Chicago, Houston. Which one hasn't been losing Black residents? It's the one that's building homes. New York, LA, Chicago. I've been losing Black residents. It's not rhetoric that avoids displacement. It's allowing enough homes for everybody in a market. We've got a racial wealth gap in this country. When there are too few homes, the people with the most resources win, and the people with the fewest resources lose. It doesn't have to be this way. There can be enough for everybody. It's good for the economy, right? It's good for holding down energy usage. It's good for increasing opportunity and letting people live near the places they go every day. Housing is not a zero-sum game. But when cities have treated it like it is a zero-sum game by not allowing enough new housing, displacement has resulted. The cities that are avoiding displacement most effectively are those that are allowing enough homes for everybody, especially lower-cost homes, like apartments, like townhouses. Raleigh was really struggling with housing affordability as Raleigh's been growing and they've seen an influx of residents, and rents there were rising fast. They addressed it head on and enacted strong local land use reforms in 2021 and followed it up with another set in 2022. As soon as they did, housing production shot up there. And a lot of the new housing that came online was housing that previously wasn't allowed by right. Apartments near transit, accessory dwelling units, duplexes, townhouses. Once they did, we saw rent growth slow down as the new housing came online. Homelessness had been going up in Raleigh. Now it started going down because rent growth has slowed down. Rents are the strongest predictor of homelessness. If we want to know how much homelessness there is in an area, we can look at rents, and that tells us most of what we need to know. If you're using a model to try and figure out how much homelessness there is in a market, rents, housing costs have more predictive power than everything else combined. The places that have seen rents go up sharply have seen homelessness rise in tandem. And the places that have held rent growth low have held homelessness down. It's no surprise that the homelessness rate in San Francisco is 20 times higher than the homelessness rate in Houston, because rents drive homelessness. So I'm going to talk about a couple of solutions that we're seeing cities adopt, that we're seeing states adopt. These are pretty. These are from South Bend, Indiana. They put out a nice little catalog of pre-approved plans. This is to make it easier to build homes in the city. That's a sixplex on the left, stacked duplex, side-by-side duplex. They have a catalog of pre-approved plans. If you're a builder, you can just use a plan from their catalog, go get your permit right away, and go and build. You just do a site plan review to make sure it's suitable for the lot. And that holds down costs because you don't pay an architect and because you're using a pre-approved plan. And it speeds up permitting sharply during the process. This is a nice little solution, not very controversial. We're seeing more cities, over 40 cities have adopted, or towns have adopted some kind of pre-approved plans now. This is a nice little solution. It's not a game changer, but it does reduce the cost of building a little bit. I want to flag some progress in Dallas. So the plans that Dallas has enacted, which I won't go over in detail because you're here, and you know a lot of these, and propositions, and especially this spring's parking reform to reduce parking mandates in the city. And I want to flag that Dallas has also taken steps to comply with the new state laws that Texas passed this session, including SB 840, which has, not every city has complied as readily and as cleanly as Dallas has with that law to allow apartments on commercially zoned land. And also that Dallas is looking at building codes too, to allow more homes under the single family building code, although there are certainly some costs that have been added there. So it's still not as inexpensive to build, say, 6 or 8 units as it is to build 1 or 2 on the building code side. But I wanted to flag that Dallas is taking some real steps in the right direction, and we've absolutely seen that rent decrease that I flagged on the prior chart. And you know, homelessness has started to edge down in Dallas also in the last few years after rising. So some of what's going on, you may have heard about the housing laws that Texas passed this session, 7 bipartisan housing laws to allow more homes. Well, other states have gotten in on the action also. We look back 2011 to 2016, this was really a purely local conversation, and we weren't seeing states step up and address the need for more homes. 2011 to 2016, all states combined in the US only passed an average of 1 law a year to allow more homes. Then 2017 to 2022, that jumps up to an average of 18 laws a year. The prior 2 years, an average of 48. 2025 was a banner year for housing. States passed more than 100 laws around the country to allow more homes, including 7 of them in Texas. This makes a lot of sense because we can't only address housing locally. Local regulatory barriers matter enormously, but housing markets are regional, and what the jurisdictions near your jurisdiction do matters a lot for local rents. When Grand Prairie blocks apartments, or Frisco blocks apartments, that matters to what happens in Dallas in terms of rents, in terms of homelessness. So the 7 laws that Texas passed are really a terrific national model. This was the single best legislative session I would say we've seen any state have to allow more homes around the country. Legalizing multifamily in commercial areas under SB 840, legalizing starter homes on lots as small as 3,000 square feet in cities and unbuilt areas, simplifying office to residential conversions in cities, limiting protest petitions against rezoning, allowing single-stair small apartment buildings, that's updating the building code, allowing the expanded use of manufactured housing, and curbing roommate occupancy limits, but only in college towns. All of these are solid steps to improve housing affordability that will make a difference in the coming years in Texas by bringing more housing online, including lower cost housing. So, what do these all have in common? We've got a dog park, a yoga studio, public art, meaning a fee for public art, dog wash. We've got an Olympic-sized swimming pool and heavy industry. These are the tactics that some cities in the Dallas area, but not Dallas itself, have been using to add requirements to SB 840, the state law. Sure, you can build apartments under the new state law, SB 840, if you add an Olympic-sized swimming pool to the building, if you add a yoga studio, if you add a dog wash. I have a dog. Use the bathtub. A fee for public art. This is not good faith addressing housing affordability in your area by mandating an Olympic-sized swimming pool if people need apartments to live in your jurisdiction. Kudos to Dallas for not doing any of these to try and avoid allowing apartments under the new state law, SB 840. But we do see 5 municipalities in the Dallas region: Irving, Plano, Arlington, Frisco, Grand Prairie, that have been adding mandates that make building apartments very challenging or more expensive. So, talked about renting a lot. We're going to talk about homeownership for a minute. Homeownership rates have declined fairly sharply, especially among 25 to 44-year-olds since the 1990s. What about homeownership? So, large minimum lot sizes are part of what makes a single-family house expensive, forcing people to buy more land than they want or can afford. That drives up costs for builders, so then they build large houses instead of small ones because they've got to cover their costs, and people need a large yard even if they don't want to spend Saturday mowing the lawn. Well, Houston and Austin have decreased their minimum lot sizes, as have a couple other large cities. Houston did it first, so we've got the most data there. But Texas, under SB 15, did decrease minimum lot sizes to 3,000 square feet in certain areas of large cities this session, and Maine actually did it everywhere in the state that has sewer and water in 2025. These are the only 2 states that have passed minimum lot size reforms at the state level. So, how do we know this works and improves housing affordability? Well, we looked at research done by researchers at University of Texas at Austin, and they found that in Houston, in 2020, looking at single-family homes on large lots of at least 5,000 square feet in the city, those were valued at an average of $545,000. Homes on small lots, though, $340,000. That is an absolute game changer for affordability. That's the kind of reform that can bring more people into home ownership by allowing homes on smaller lots. A family had to earn 168% of the area median income to afford a large lot home, only 105% of the area median income to afford a small lot home. So Houston was outbuilding Dallas pretty handily from 2015 to 2022, adding 48% more homes in the city of Houston than in the city of Dallas during that time. The majority of this difference between the 2 cities was actually small lot homes in Houston, homes on lots under 5,000 square feet. They weren't all 1,400 square feet, some of that, but also lots of 2,000 square feet or 3,000 square feet. But by allowing homes on smaller lots, that let builders take an acre of land, and instead of only being able to turn it into, say, 6 homes or 8 homes, they had more flexibility to meet people's needs. 15 homes, 20, 25. That way, if you can't afford a lot of land or you don't want it, you're not priced out of the community. You're not priced out of homeownership. There's more flexibility. Manufactured housing used to be called mobile homes before there was a federal building code. Manufactured housing has gotten quite good. Similar quality now to site-built housing, especially after the 1994 HUD code update, but it costs much less because it's actually built on an assembly line in a factory and then shipped to the site. We're not seeing a lot of site-built starter homes anymore. Homes under 1,400 square feet used to be about 40% of housing starts in the 1980s. Now they're under 10% of housing starts for site-built homes. So how do we get homes on small lots again? Manufactured housing is a great solution. SB 785 this session that Texas passed will make it somewhat easier to use manufactured housing in Texas, but this is also a solution to home ownership for people who are priced out of a more expensive site-built house. And manufactured housing has gotten energy efficient as well. It's as durable as site-built when placed on a foundation. What about condos? One way to get more condos is going to be allowing small apartment buildings, 4 to 6 stories, that have under 24 units, to have one stairway instead of mandating 2. There's no difference in safety, and it allows for family-sized condos that have 2 or 3 bedrooms. The requirement for 2 stairways means that you get a corridor in the middle of the hall, and that's why new apartment buildings look like hotels, where you've got studios and 1-bedrooms mostly. You can do 2 and 3 bedroom condos if you're allowed to have 1 stairway in the building for small buildings, and there's no trade-off in safety. So you can see how family-sized units fit more easily because you get that flexibility with the stairway in the middle. You can have windows on 2 sides, even 3 sides. That lets you do 2 or 3 bedrooms in the unit instead of 1. Most people want to buy a multi-bedroom condo, whether they are an empty nester who's going to downsize, or freeing up a single-family detached home, or it's somebody who's going to become a first-time homeowner, and they're thinking about a condo as a starter home. So I've been talking about housing, and clearly the benefits are enormous, but what about public opinion? Sometimes I hear from stakeholders and policymakers that, sure, we need more housing, but what will the neighbors think? The public cares about housing affordability quite a lot. This is a very serious concern for the public because housing is the largest line item in household budgets. And the public opinion, though, is not always reflected at neighborhood meetings. Not always. Why is that? Got several academic papers on this topic finding that the people who show up for a 6-hour meeting that starts at noon on a Wednesday are a little different than the rest of us. They are not likely to be hourly employees. They are not likely to have young kids. They are not likely to be renters. They are certainly not likely to be people without homes. The processes we've used to gauge public input on housing have made our housing policy less reflective of public sentiment, not more. When we do proactive outreach, when we do survey research, we get very, very different results than what is incoming when we use long in-person meetings as the way to gauge public sentiment about whether to allow enough homes for everyone or not. Interviewed the former mayor of New Rochelle, New York. He oversaw proportionally about the biggest zoning reform in the country to allow more homes. They actually rezoned the 300 acres of their downtown for apartment buildings of basically any size, including high-rises, after not allowing much housing there. And he said, if you were to only observe public hearings and social media posts, you would think that nobody likes housing. But when they did proactive outreach, turned out they got a lot of support for downtown revitalization and for allowing more homes. And when he ran for re-election as mayor, he was re-elected easily. And so were the city council members who had supported it. We really see that pattern throughout the country, where there ends up being a lot of support for more housing, but it's not reflected in the usual techniques we use of holding long in-person public meetings about every apartment building. When we surveyed the public using a nationally representative survey of 5,000 people, we found overwhelming support for allowing more homes, especially in commercial corridors and in downtowns, and in allowing more flexibility so that people could find the homes that are right for them. And this really did not vary by party. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, very similar. And we see that reflected in the states that have allowed more homes by passing laws at the state level. Very diverse section of states that have Republican trifectas, Democratic trifectas, or mixed governance, right? Whether it's Texas and Florida and Montana, or Washington and Maine and Vermont, or kind of states that are more split, like Arizona and New Hampshire. We really see this throughout the country. So I'm putting my email address up here so you can have slides, but also because if there are questions that you have or you'd like more information, we're studying what's going on around the country, and it's just remarkable to see the transformation in this discussion because of the work that people like you are doing at the local level and at the state level. And I thank you for that and invite up the keynote panelists.
Good afternoon. Oh, y'all sound tired. You had that lunch and now you want a nap? Let's try it again. Good afternoon. That's what I'm talking about. For the people that were in the back that cheered for me, I told them their checks are coming soon. So I appreciate it. If you want to give me a check, I'll take that too. Well, I am Dr. Froswa Booker, and I am elated to moderate this panel with this amazing group. And so welcome to our conversation on growth without displacement. And I'd like to introduce our amazing panelists. Our keynote speaker is a part of this panel. Alex, thank you. Continuing this conversation with our community leaders. I want to introduce Gloria Ardilla, who went to UNT Dallas, got her master's in public leadership here, and is a West Dallas-raised, community-rooted leader, shaping voices and spaces that matter. She is the Director of Ops and Programs at Dallas Free Press, as well as the co-founder, CEO of Josephine Torres Cultural Center. Gloria is here to uplift, organize, and keep it real. Nicole Raphiel is a Dallas native whose family roots trace back to South Dallas, where she proudly works today and serves as Community Development Project Manager at St. Philip's School and Community Center. She's directly responsible for advancing the new construction housing efforts and other housing initiatives, including advancing the South Dallas Community Investment Trust at St. Philip's. In addition, Nicole brings valuable strategic insight from her 7 years of dedicated civic leadership on the DeSoto, Texas City Council. Welcome, Nicole. Victor, Toledo's family exiled from Cuba and settled in Dallas. He is a graduate of the University of Texas and Austin and SMU Law School. After practicing law for many years, he is now a real estate developer and owner of Greenleaf Ventures, LLC. They work primarily in West Dallas and the Buckner Terrace areas and have created home ownership and generational wealth for more than 800 families. Victor believes that his work in the city of Dallas and the real estate community supports the ministry by maximizing opportunities that are afforded to Brother Bills to best serve those in the community where he serves as a proud board member. Welcome, Victor. Welcome all to the panel. Alex, I'm going to throw it off because I know I sent y'all questions, but I was listening in the back and I had a question. And I wonder if, in your presentation, you talked about when homes are created and people move from different socioeconomic statuses. And so wealthy people may move out of a place, middle income move in. I'd like to talk about, are we addressing segregation by income and race? And when those people move to those different areas, amenities also leave with them. And so I'd love to have you talk a little bit about how do we address this where we're not continuing to segregate people by race and class?
I think that's a great question. And we do see that when homes of all shapes and sizes are allowed, a greater diversity of people can live together because they can afford to live together. Living in a duplex costs less usually than living in a single-family detached home. So if a neighborhood can have both, you can have a greater diversity of people. Renters have much lower wealth than homeowners. If you've got a community that is overwhelmingly single-family detached homes, it's going to be mostly homeowners. And so we see less opportunity for people to interact. We see increased segregation because people are priced out, because the type of home they can afford to live in is restricted from a community. Allowing a greater diversity of housing types allows a greater diversity of people.
And you make me think about the importance of what I love to research is social capital. So by having that kind of diversity, you see people having access to people that can help them with social mobility. What are your thoughts around social capital and its role in this space?
Absolutely. We see that in states that have more economic mobility, there absolutely are social ties and social capital that are part of that. And the way that we can be most effective in achieving that is not using policy, usually local government policy, to separate people from each other based on the types of homes that they can afford. If somebody doesn't have a car, but they have to pay for a parking spot anyway as part of their rent, that makes a community less accessible to them. The bottom quarter of households by wealth, a third of them don't own a car at all, but they're especially likely to be renters, meaning they're paying for a parking spot even if they can't afford the car to put in it.
Thank you. I'd love to bring the rest of the panel into the conversation. I'd love to learn from each of you. What does growth without displacement mean? And how do you envision a Dallas that has successfully achieved growth without displacement in 10 years? So, Gloria, what does that look like for you? I know I put you on blast.
Yes. I think growth without displacement, that's a big question, but when you think about it, it really is about intent. It has to come from intent. And the reason I say that is historically, for anyone that's lived in Dallas was, our history in downtown, we have a river there, and that river kept flooding the city. And city planning has been a nightmare since the 1800s. In 1909, they go and they bring George Kessler to come and do the city planning things. And the first thing he describes is the chaos and mess that there is in the city about the neighborhoods, and then that there was no intent in how things were done, that it was just basically a chaos. And when you think that, when I started thinking about what he said, I started realizing that this has been an intentional act against our communities, and it goes way back down to that point. Because since then, since 1909 when he made this statement, nothing has changed. We're looking at 2025 today, where people are still acting in the same way, and I speak people with power, people with money, that are able to they're able to buy properties out and are able to move people out of these properties. There's nothing in place in the planning that has implemented anything that's going to be a solution to this. We've known about this problem. It exists in so many different cities. In Dallas, we've seen this rapidly become a problem in West Dallas, where I'm from. I've seen it in South Dallas, where I've also lived. I've seen it in East Dallas, where I've also lived. And I see it in Oak Cliff, where I currently live. So this is not a new problem, and the solution, it really has to be an intentional solution from the people with power. So when I think about this, I think about how do we, as the community, work towards the solution by working towards creating places that will allow for city to make enforcement, for them to enforce a lot of the work that communities do to help circumvent some of these situations that are occurring in the city. So in my opinion, it really is about making sure that we do some intentional work within the powers that be, the people that actually have the tools to move this and to shape this, because I've seen it from a community perspective, the challenges are so much higher if we don't have that.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And I want to start with our goal at St. Philip's is to be the ultimate school-based model for successful community transformation. And now I'm going to think about my family who lived in West Dallas, my family who lived in South Dallas. And so in the work that I get to do at St. Philip's in our community development department, as it relates to housing, one of the things that St. Philip's learned, and I'm so grateful that St. Philip's did learn this, is to look at what did happen in West Dallas when the change started to happen. And so with that, strategy started to, the wheels started to moving as it relates to strategies of what do we need to do when it comes to land. And so when land was about $2.50 a foot, you know, St. Philip's and partners who saw the vision and saw what happened in West Dallas decided to let's move forward with doing that. Because if you own the land, you can control what happens to the land. And so where we sit today in just the actuals of like what does anti-displacement look like in our community, in the triangle that we serve, in the immediate area that we serve, what it looks like is making certain to work with our families in preservation, home preservation. For those families who I've seen literally people sell their homes 10 cents on a dollar, you know, growing up. You know, it's like somebody come and say, well, let me just be transparent. My family sold the family home for $30,000. The person turned around and put it out there for a higher value. And so you have other individuals who have done that very same thing, thinking they will go somewhere and live cheaply, and they can't. They've discovered they've not been able to do that. And so as it relates to preservation, making certain that we take care of those homes and families, and policies are in place for preservation. That's very important. I mean, I feel like I'm going everywhere, but as it relates to the city of Dallas, I'm proud that they do have that preservation program, but it has been hard for some people to get those funds to do the deferred maintenance that was needed to be done as a result of insurance they could not receive because of where the home was located. And then you keep going on down that line. And so around preservation, home repairs, I believe that's really important. And then just ensuring from a ministry model, from a nonprofit model, from a, you know, we want to ensure that we take care of our people, the naturally occurring affordable homes, making certain that we have place for them. So government can't do it alone, developers can't do it alone, organizations cannot do it alone. It is up to the collective ethos of those who see value in ensuring that we don't displace our culture, our communities, that we all collectively do our part, making certain that we can tap into those partnerships, tap into our local government, put policies in place to ensure that this type of displacement doesn't happen. But it's a very intentional thing that St. Philip's thinks is very important. And so I'm very proud to get to do that work and look forward to sharing some additional policy ideas.
Great. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me, Brian. We appreciate the invitation. It's a tremendous opening. What you covered, you know, when I look at you talked about the land use regulations and how great Texas has done, and I see that the SB 840 alone has changed the dialogue of every zoning case in the state. I mean, there's not, you know, I talk to people all the time, like there's every car lot, every vacant commercial property could be multifamily now, and so it's really going to change the dynamic, and it's going to really. So when we talk about displacement, it's you know, talk about housing supply. That one act alone is really going to tremendously impact us. On growth without displacement, what our company's done, and I know some others in this room have done. We typically do small lot infill subdivisions on what I call gritty, underutilized areas. So we're not really displacing, you know, we're not, you know, tearing out subdivisions and putting in apartments. We're, you know, we're taking 18-acre sites next to lead smelters and redeveloping them into 300 housing units. So, you know, to see that being done across the city, there's an authorized hearing in West Dallas to rezone, I think it's 200 acres from heavy industrial uses. I think you had a picture of one earlier to what's probably going to end up being mostly apartments. Another factor on the displacement, I want to touch on it, is there are other vehicles in place, and one is a public facilities corporation, and I'm proudly serve on that board. There's other board members here, Kim Montgomery's here as well, and I read this morning that there's 43,000 apartments under development in DFW. 43,000. Well, that's great. Well, we have 8.5 million people. Only 4,000 of those are in the city of Dallas, so it's 11% of the new apartment construction. So you made a great point about, well, you got to look at what the other cities are doing. Well, those other cities, you know, they've enacted things where the Olympic-sized swimming pool. I think in Irving it has to be a 20-story building or something. It's something ridiculous if you wanted to build an apartment. But what the PFC's done is And the reason it's been so successful, and I think we're up to like 3,000 units that we've approved in 2 years, all in the city of Dallas, is that half the units have to be reserved for people that make less than 80% of AMI, which is a wonderful thing. Obviously, we need that, desperately need that. The other great thing about it is, and I don't want to compare LIHTC to PFC or HFC, but half the units have to be at market too. So the developer has an incentive to deliver a quality product, and so it's not just fully subsidized where it can become a drain on that particular community. So I've been really proud of that work as well, just to support the different initiatives the city has. I know some of your other breakouts, you're going to be talking about public-private partnerships, and you're exactly right. I can't do it alone. In our cases, we've partnered with either Dallas County or the city of Dallas, and they'll provide infrastructure funding, water, sewer, paving, and what we do is we deed restrict the houses. So half the houses, again, to be between 80 and 120%. So it's not easy work. It takes a while, but if you stitch it together, over time, we've been able to, provide a lot of housing, and look forward to doing more.
Alex, you want to say anything about vision for growth without displacement?
Sure. So if we think about affordability as really being central to what people need from housing, go back to 2017. I flagged Minneapolis before as a city that's made it a lot easier to build. Back in 2017, a resident had to earn 80% of the area median income to afford the median rent. But they've kept adding apartments. They've eliminated their parking minimums. They're allowing apartments by right near commerce, near transit. 2024, a resident had to earn 67% of the area median income to afford the median rent. That's a pretty quick improvement, to go from 80% to 67% that you need to earn being the median. Austin, 2017, resident had to earn 83% of the area median income to afford the median rent. Last year, as Austin's building boom has really taken root, that number was 65%. That's a dramatic improvement in 7 years. I know sometimes people say it took us decades to get into this mess. It's going to take us decades to get out. I don't think that's borne out by the data. I think when we get serious about housing and make it a lot easier to build and welcome a greater diversity of homes and remove the regulatory barriers that are blocking them, we actually see housing affordability improve pretty quickly.
So it sounds like in order to avoid some of these challenges that we've had, partnerships are going to be core to this work. It's centering community is another piece. You said, Gloria, intent is very important in making sure that the people who are at the table are aware of the voices that aren't always there. So one of the things that was brought up, Nicole, you brought up preservation and talked a bit about that. Why is that an important conversation to this? As we talk about building more housing, there is this need to make sure that people, especially from marginalized communities, still can stay in place as they want to. So talk a bit about that and your efforts in that space.
Sure thing. One of the things that I've seen in our neighborhood are legacy residents, those residents who've inherited their homes from their parents or grandparents, and they're still in the homes. And so many of them do not have the deferred maintenance, the ability to take care of the deferred maintenance. And as I mentioned, talking about insurance and such. And so ensuring that there's a mechanism, trigger, or communities or organizations that care, that we do the preservation work is very important. As it relates to our housing continuum, ensuring that our neighbors have dignified housing was one of those things that was very important to us. And so with that, with the minor home repair program, I can testify to seeing homes that may be on the cusp of being condemned, but there's no other place that that family or that individual can live as cheap as they are living there right now. And I'm going to backtrack to what happened in West Dallas. I actually knew one worker. She worked for 40 years at a daycare. She rented her home for 40 years at a daycare. The two went together. And her community decided to reach out to their council member for help for those homes. So if you remember the stories of the landlord who basically pushed those people out when the city said it would come in and help. There was no place that she could go. Now, she never rose to the place of being able to purchase a home. But because the home was so dilapidated, and as the property owner, landlord, did not do any of the deferred maintenance, which was horrible. So now that's the landlord situation. Now think about the person who owns the home, who may have had the stroke, and now the rain is coming in the house. And I'm just recounting just actual stories of homeowners in our neighborhoods that I've actually touched. And so the preservation piece is so very important, because there's not enough Social Security that many of these seniors have, not enough disability that they have to go and live somewhere and live on the incomes that they currently have. And so the preservation piece is so terribly important. And as it relates to housing stock, yes, we need to increase housing stock, but we do have the housing stock with those individuals who are still there. And so, yeah.
Thanks, Nicole. Gloria, you've done a lot of work in West Dallas and centering community. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your work and why is it important to center community in these conversations?
Before I can speak about my work, I was raised in West Dallas. I went there in 1985, so that kind of dates my years. Don't do your math. So I have the history that we've had there. West Dallas is by far the most gentrified neighborhood in Dallas, if you are not aware of that. Some of our neighbors, a large number of our neighbors, because of the fact that there was a lack of preservation, are dealing with 900% increase in their property tax values. Now, for you to get an idea of that, that is a crazy, crazy, crazy number that is impacting a lot of people in trying to preserve that. Furthermore, La Bajada, the neighborhood that I am from, which, let me just point this out. How many of you know the area known as Trinity Groves? Raise your hand. Congratulations. Trinity Groves is a spot in La Bajada. La Bajada is the neighborhood. We have been around since 1929. So when we talk about preservation, that's a key part of also respecting the neighborhood, its identity, and what came with it. So that was one of the parts that we saw the first kick in the early 2000s when Trinity Groves came into La Bajada and sort of created this identity of its own and completely erased El Aceite, which is the neighborhood across from us. So when we talk about preservation, those were the key parts of it. Now, La Bajada also had a community center called Bataan. Bataan has been in the neighborhood since the 1940s. It is a social center that was gifted to the community that helped the Mexican-American barrio uplift itself and created advocacy. I'm a very proud person that was raised there. I grew up right across the street. And Bataan, because of the unity and the fact that it was in the heart of the community, it brought everyone together. Now, we can all live amongst each other and call each other neighbors. But it isn't until we unify, it isn't until we come together that we can actually create a community sense in our neighborhoods. I have seen how preservation of not just the neighborhood itself, but the culture and the community itself are the things that help to preserve housing, are the things that help to keep people in place. West Dallas has been a perfect example of that. We have collaborations with different nonprofits, different church groups. They founded the Builders of Hope, who has done the kit that you guys received in your package. You have different types of programs that have come out and rooted from there. My work at Bataan Center was increasingly important in 2017, when all of a sudden, all this rapid change, the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge was completed, and that property that was about at the highest, maybe $80,000, was now trying to be sold for $11 million. This was an organization, again, this was a center that's the heart of the heart of our neighborhood. And because of this, and because of the fight of the community members, we stood up and we basically fought this. And we went through trials, courts, all kinds of things that lasted almost about 10 years. And all I can tell you is that the reason that I'm here and the reason that we're still here and the reason that today Bataan Center is in the hands of the community is because there was the unity that it took for all of us to be there, and the fact that we did not give up. The third part that kept us here is the fact that we realized that as a community, we were a low-income area, we were gonna need resources, we were gonna need to collaborate with bigger people. So we did that. We went out and we built a village. we went out and we worked with other organizations and organizations that have been founded in West Dallas for a long time, and we said, hey, can you support us? And they walked along this path with us. But today, because of the fact that we have the center back in our hands, because of the fact that we were able to save it, we're able to bring our communities back in. And for those of us that are not familiar with West Dallas and La Bajada, they have been the leading group to basically establish different types of protocols and different types of things to sort of help us to understand that the housing is a necessity, but gentrification is a different scope to that. And in that community, in 2007, they created a neighborhood stabilization overlay that the whole community came together to place, and it was adopted by the city of Dallas. Why is it then that if we created this overlay in 2022, a lawyer found a loophole and realized that all he had to do was move his house back to be able to circumvent the overlay, the 30-foot height, the foot requirement that they couldn't go over? A lawyer in that loophole, and he built the first house that faces the river. Why is this so important? Because we created this in a soul. It was adopted. And again, this is why I say about intent and about making sure that as we build these things, the only thing that's going to keep them there is if they're being enforced. Because now we have houses that are going up all over our community that are these giant mansions, and the next step that they're using is saying they have to build a mechanical room for their elevators to get to their third floors and their second floors. And that's how they're circumventing creating another loophole to create these massive mansions next to our small homes. We were all about change. We were all about welcoming people, and we were all about improvement. We were not about displacement, and we were not about losing our neighborhood. And we were definitely not about losing our identity and the hard work that it took to build West Dallas and the places that we've had there. So when we talk about all this and we talk about the work that I've done, I'm very passionate about the community. I'm very passionate about speaking to things. Much like Nicole, I had a neighbor who sold her house in just a few years ago. She sold her house and she moved to Duncanville. That house that she lived in was her grandmother's house, so she couldn't do the taxing and none of that thing, so she decided just to sell it and move away. 9 months later, I had to call my friends and ask for help to find her shelter. She had lost her home, she had lost the money, she had lost everything. So to us, the lower income people, the Black and brown community, the solutions have to be intentional. Otherwise, they're not gonna be helpful and they're not gonna get to us. So when we think about this planning and we think about these houses and we think about all these opportunities, we have to figure out how those actually are accessible. Because the city of Dallas has promised us all these incentives. They promised tax cutoffs, all kinds of things that never made it to most of the residents. So we have to be more intentional about it, and we have to speak to the people that are directly being impacted by it. And this is why preservation of community is so important, and why community staying together and unity is even more powerful than we ever thought.
And you bring up an excellent point that in order to do this, it has to be in partnership and collaboration. And so part of this conversation is with developers and the builders and community. And Victor, as a developer, could you share more about tax-driven incentives and your work to create more affordable housing opportunities in Dallas? What are some financing tools or incentives you have seen work very well?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Well, the two that come to mind, and there's been a lot of publicity about them, are housing finance corporations and public facility corporations. And for those that don't understand what they do, is that they partner with HFCs or PFCs, a developer does, and they don't have property taxes on the property for a lengthy period of time, 75 years. But what they don't tell you is there's a lease payment to the city that more than replaces the city's share of the property taxes. So it's not like we're not getting any money, from these projects. And as I mentioned earlier, of the 4,000 units in Dallas, I have had, being on the PSC, I have developers come to me all the time now, and apartment developers, and they've said there's two kinds of apartments being built in Dallas right now: luxury and subsidized, PFC, HFC, and there's really not any LIHTC. So that's really, the bulk of the market in this place. So to answer the question, having that tax incentive has been tremendous. The system was abused. There's something called traveling HFCs that people have heard of, like Cameron County and Pleasanton, Texas, came up here and bought some apartments, and they get the lease payments, and it didn't do any benefit for the city of Dallas. So that had to get tamped down at the state level. Unfortunately, they did. They took care of that. But Dallas still is doing PFCs, and we're still doing HFCs. So those two certainly come to mind. We still have the various HUD programs. CDBG funds are still available. Various infrastructure programs are out there. ARPA, there's still some money left over from the different ARPA and TARP funds that came during the pandemic, and some of that can be used for affordable housing and has been.
And so I want to open it up to the audience to ask questions of the panel, and then I'll have one final question for our panel to close this out. So are there any questions that the audience might have for this brilliant group?
Pass this straight back behind you. 4 rows.
Good afternoon. I'm Ann Lott with the Inclusive Communities Project. I think my question is for Victor and for Alex. Like Gloria, I started in West Dallas in 1985 when it was 460 units of low-income public housing next to a lead smelter. And I watched many, many sick children suffer exposure to that lead smelter. And so, Victor, when I heard you talk about 200 acres of multifamily housing on heavy industry, I felt a little bit triggered. Can you talk a little bit about what you as a developer will do and the city of Dallas will do to ensure that the children who live in that community will not be affected by that heavy industry? And then Alex, if you could talk about what other cities are doing, if that's going to be a viable use in the future to build more affordable housing.
Wayne, I want to first compliment you on your work at DHA. Because of your efforts, we ended up the Greenleaf Village development was really the first large development in that area, and it really brought stability to West Dallas. This is back in 2002, and that was 300 houses, if I recall. So anyway, I want to tip my cap to you on that point. When they cleaned up West Dallas, as everybody here very well knows, the focus was on the lead smelter. Well, they didn't finish the job. They didn't take care of the GAF plant. They didn't take care of Boozy Unisum, some of the concrete plants across the railroad track. So now, 50 years later, they're trying to rectify that. And obviously the focus is on GAF and the school next to it and what have you. So, everything between the rail line and Singleton is under an authorized hearing. Should have been done 20 years ago, but at least it's getting done. So for me, since I don't live there, I've told Councilman Cadena, if you need somebody to start the lawsuit or to initiate the action to get rid of them, I will certainly do that at my own expense. I'm happy to. So we had a meeting Tuesday night in the community, and so the efforts are underway, and I'm going to applaud the city. I saw Thor earlier. I know he's been real active in that as well. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, housing shouldn't go next to lead smelters. That's not a good place for housing. Sometimes when we talk about restrictive zoning, I think we use a charitable explanation, which is we want to separate uses. But what actually happens is we separate people, and the people with the least political power end up in the most dangerous places. But also the fact that we haven't been able to build enough housing means that our housing stock is the oldest it's ever been. The median age of tenant-occupied housing in the US right now is 43 years old. It's never been that old before. Why? It's just because we're not adding enough new homes. Old homes are more dangerous than new homes. Lead paint, asbestos, depending where you're in the country, it can be radon. But also, just because we've done work on this, the strongest predictor of whether someone dies in a residential fire in a home is the age of the home. Homes built before single-family houses or apartments built before 1970 have a residential fire death rate 17 times higher than apartments built since 2010. The fact that we're not building new housing, especially in high opportunity, low risk areas that have less danger, is not protecting people. We need more of that new housing, not less. And when we don't build it, we put people in danger because they end up in old, fire-prone homes and homes that have environmental dangers. And one of those environmental dangers is location. In parts of the country with wildfire risk, restrictive zoning is pushing people to live out in areas that are fire-prone because they're not able to afford housing in places that are less risky because not enough of it is allowed there.
Hi, my name is Cici Encarnacion. I'm a writer with Dallas Weekly, but I'm also the director of outreach for the Sarin Foundation. We are an urban environmentalism based in South Dallas, and we focus on addressing environmental injustice issues like code issues and illegal dumping. Something that we're seeing, which I know is a problem citywide, but especially in South Dallas, is when people are being displaced, evicted from their homes, whether it's they're a renter tenant and the landlord is evicting them, or whether they were a homeowner and they are being evicted by somebody that did a deed sale on their home, bought their home by paying the property taxes. These landlords and developers, a lot of them, when we look them up, look like a lot of the developers here in this room, weaponize law enforcement to embarrass and humiliate tenants by violently removing all of their property from the home and then illegal dumping it all over the South Dallas neighborhood, which leads to organizations like mine having to step up and fix that issue, or try to. Do you guys have any ideas about how we can address landlords and developers weaponizing law enforcement, like the Dallas County Sheriff's and Constable's Office, to violate people's rights by damaging their property?
I don't have an answer to that, but I will add that Bishop Arts, there was stuff that we could look into Bishop Arts of where code enforcement was utilized as weaponized towards the neighborhood. So we can connect later to see if we can dig into that.
And then I would just add, that's a policy issue. That's just 100% a policy issue. And so I think policy changes as far as what is the first step, second step, third step. So that's with the city, local, and then that's with the county.
One thing, when it comes to crime and theft and what have you, I would encourage the use of technology. You know, in all of our communities now, when we go in and talk about, oh, there's crime, well, everybody's got a Ring camera now. And everybody's got, you know, in one of our West Dallas communities, we provided solar activated lighting. So everybody in their backyard, if somebody is in their backyard, boom, it comes on. It costs $8, you know, to have, it's just a deterrent thing. So little things like that. Body cameras, if you're an apartment dweller, I would certainly use cameras. You know, if there's activity that's, you know, not legal, certainly do that.
So the last question I want to ask you all, and thank you, audience, for those important questions and necessary questions. But if you could implement one bold housing policy in Dallas, not even tomorrow, you had a magic wand and could do it today, what would it be?
As a nonprofit community developer, we do have rental housing. And so, but we do not get the benefit of being the nonprofit owning the property and then making certain that the rents are within the levels that the community can afford. And so from a policy perspective, I would like to see some language around ensuring that for those who do not have the profit motive, it's very different from those who are, you know, have the profit motive, or who are even giving, you know, you're doing half market, half, you know, moderate or low income. But for organizations that truly do not have that profit motive, have levers in place, whether it's freezing the taxes, at the point of purchase, at the point of continuing to renovate the property, to ensure that the property values, not property values, but the rents are within the income levels for that particular census tract. I think that would be something I would advocate for.
I'd focus on the permitting and the approval process at OCMOC. There's been some talk about allowing architects and engineers to self-certify when they submit plans, and that way they don't have to go through the same review process. And it's not that the city staff isn't capable, it's just they're just overwhelmed. And so it shouldn't take 4 months to get something pretty simple reviewed and approved. And again, it's not competency, it's just, it's just a numbers game. And so, and the city's done some good things about that. I know they keep trying, but that's what I'd focus on.
I think if I could implement something, it would be a community fund that would be sustained by the developers and incentives that are given to them that would come back to organizations such as St. Philip's and the Josephine Torres Community Centers and other root-based organizations that are helping to solve these problems from the bottom up, because I feel that we get a lot of eyes and ears in places that upper-level places don't, and we're able to solve things a little bit faster and quicker for people. So there needs to be some incentives that are put aside as well for that kind of preservation that goes back down to being intentional.
The places that have improved affordability the most are those that have made it the easiest to build, and that has usually meant allowing as much housing as possible to go through a by-right process. If it has to go through a discretionary or a conditional process, subject to extensive public meetings, public hearings, more paperwork, more reviews, more design reviews, more site plan reviews, less of it gets built. And that shortage is what's hurting affordability the most. So making as many types of housing as possible by right, especially lower cost housing, like apartments and like duplexes and like townhouses, available to go through a by right permitting process to simplify development has really been the most important key to success in places that have improved affordability by slowing rent growth, by slowing the growth in housing costs, and those places have reduced homelessness as well.
Let's thank our amazing panel for this dynamic conversation. I know we could continue, but we've got another round of productive housing conversations that we will be having, and that means we're done. So as our panelists return to their seats, please join me once again in thanking them for their insights and welcoming to the podium Christian Reyes, Vice President of Community Banking at PNC.
Hello. Thank you, Dr. Froswa Booker-Drew. So first I want to start off by thanking Brian, Tony, Ashley Brundage, and the rest of the Dallas Housing Coalition team for putting on this awesome conference. I also want to thank my colleagues, Karen Riley, who leads our philanthropy and outreach efforts, and Walter Abrego, who leads our economic development and business banking efforts. If you know me at all, you know that I love to talk about my family, especially my kids, and I learned a lot from them. And I'm not talking about the brain rot like 6, 7 that everybody knows about. Recently, I had a conversation with my daughter, Daniela, who's 10 years old, and she told me how much she appreciates and loves a tradition in the home where we actually measure her height every few months. And in speaking to my son, who's coming back from college for Thanksgiving, he's a student at the University of Arkansas, go Hogs. He really appreciates the fact that he's coming back to security in a place of belonging. That's what fuels me every day to do the work that I do, and how thankful I am to PNC for allowing me that opportunity, because not every family gets that opportunity, obviously. And so I thank you all for being here and trying to fight hard for everyone in Dallas, every person, to have a safe and secure sense of belonging in their home and ownership. So PNC is proud to serve as a gold sponsor for the Dallas Housing Summit, reflecting our mission to strengthen communities and expand access to economic opportunity. Through our Blueprint for Opportunity and Community Benefits Plan, we've made housing a cornerstone of community development. Since January of 2022, we've invested $1.6 billion in home lending across the Dallas-Fort Worth area, helping low and moderate income and majority minority households achieve home ownership. In 2024 alone, $700 million supported about 869 borrowers, complemented by first-time homebuyer grants and new affordable mortgage products. Additionally, PNC has deployed $786 million in community financing to expand affordable rental housing and neighborhood revitalization, reinforcing our commitment to equitable housing opportunities. As we look ahead, PNC remains steadfast in creating pathways for homeownership and supporting vibrant, inclusive communities. In partnership with the Dallas Housing Coalition and other community stakeholders, we will continue investing in housing solutions that empower families and strengthen neighborhoods for years to come. And Brian just texted me a little bit ago, and I need to make sure that I tell you guys this. He just emailed you guys with the correct rooms for this afternoon's breakouts. And if you didn't receive the email or were unable to pick up a name tag this morning, you can now go to the check-in table to make a name tag and leave their emails with them. I want to encourage you to enjoy the rest of the conference and the workshops. Please go ahead and visit our exhibitors, which are going to be taken down around 1:30. There's still plenty of goodies and drinks, so partake in that. And then let's meet back here to conclude the conference and give the award for the Raul Reyes Jr. Community Award. So thank you all.